my guest today, Katie, has many powerful and practical insights from her CFS recovery journey. Today, she's back in full, vibrant health, working full time in finance, and appreciating life now more than ever. Katie, I'm so glad I can share your recovery story. Thanks for being here.
Liz, thanks so much for having me. We connected on Twitter. So it was great that this all came about and you're able to connect people and share their stories and get the word out there. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Katie, why did you want to share your story today? Yeah.
Well, I mean, from my own personal experience, and this is not unique to me, but it's everybody, it's difficult. It's scary. It's challenging. There's not a lot of resources out there. Doctors are not prepared to handle this. So I feel like it takes a group of people that have been through this, have healed, have recovered to share their story, share what worked, share what didn't work for them. And at least if it just helps one person for 1 hour, sometimes at my lowest point, all you needed was like an hour of like glimpse of hope. So that's my motivation is I don't want anyone to have to we don't want anyone to have to go through this and especially to feel alone or scared and hopeless. So I want to share my story to show that there is hope.
Yeah. And totally agree and felt the same way. There wasn't much out there when I had CFS starting in 2016. There were only a couple channels. And there weren't many recovery stories, but each one of them I found were really helpful for my recovery, just knowing that it was possible. And then, learning from them as well, since you're so right. The medical community is pretty behind on this. And then the information that is out there isn't very hopeful.
Right. Yeah. For me, it was like going to the doctors and there was just run blood tests. Everything's fine. This is fine. So you resort to books, articles, and Google. But you eventually piece everything together and you land on chronic fatigue, or at least that's
Yeah,
how
that's
I got to it. Because my recurring thing was I can't exercise. I attempt to exercise and I just feel like death. And that was the thing. I was like, this seems to be the indicator. And post exertional malaise leads you to chronic fatigue. And you're kind of like, okay. But then you get there and it's like, you're stuck with this for life. And that is just not a good thing to read. It's not a good place to be at. But through a lot of digging and a lot of researching and changes and effort, you can make progress over time.
yeah, very powerfully stated. Yes. So, Katie, what were your main symptoms and challenges during your journey?
I would say I probably had three main symptoms: the blood sugar dysregulation, orthostatic intolerance, meaning like I couldn't stand up for long periods of time without feeling dizzy, breaking out a sweat. At some points, it would even happen if I was sitting down. And then lastly, the exercise intolerance, just not being able to exercise at all, going from being able to just get up and go run 5 miles without thinking about a thing to being like, how am I going to walk 200 feet down the street without literally passing out?
Mhm. Did you have any digestion issues?
I didn't have any digestion issues, but I want to kind of hedge that with gut issues were definitely a thing, even though they weren't manifesting themselves in a typical digestion way.
Mhm.
So I did address those.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did tackle the gut with prebiotics and things of that nature. Apple skins.
Oh, yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit about your life before you got CFS?
So before my life was normal, it was great. You know, you don't realize how much of an active life you live until it's kind of taken away. So fairly active life. I wasn't doing Spartan things on the weekend or anything, but I'd be exercising regularly, hanging out with people, going to the beach, surfing, doing all that stuff. And from like a resume standpoint, I played college athletics. I went to law school and I work in finance. So I've had a very rigorous trajectory that's been very challenging. And when an event like CFS happens, it really makes you reflect and be like, wow, you took the little things for granted that allowed you to make all these accomplishments. So I had a fairly traditional life, a great life. And thankfully, I'm able to say I still have a great life. So that's a little bit of my background and how everything was going until everything was going great until it wasn't.
So most people who get CFS have a perfect storm of physical, psychological, environmental, biological, what have you, elements and events that lead up to this. And you probably had one of the craziest perfect storms I've ever heard. Can you enlighten us what your perfect storm was, Katie?
Sure. Yeah. So it all started early 2018, and I was having episodes of what I call low blood sugar and dizziness. And I was very lean at the time. So I thought, okay, you need to put on a couple pounds. I put on a couple pounds, felt a little bit better here and there, but then that started dwindling. I was going on about life. Work was getting a little stressful, home life, personal life getting a little stressful. And then one day, going to help my parents out, and I got in a car accident, and a wild turkey hit my car. It sounds ridiculous, but wild turkeys are out there. Watch out. I was just driving along the highway, and boom, this turkey just flew out. Boom, smack. Turkey totaled my car. So there was that event, and there was like big family events after that. And I got this sinus infection that just kind of wouldn't go away. So that lasted about a month. And then the summer came and I felt better. I was feeling a little bit better. And so I was like, oh, okay, that was just a rough patch, it's all good. Then the fall came and dizziness all coming back. And I was like, what? Just kind of lingering in the back of my head. Okay, maybe my diet's wrong. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And then one weekend, I was babysitting my nephew for my sister. A normal occasion, he had a little cold, and she just wanted to take my niece to a birthday party. And I was babysitting him, and he ended up seizing, but then he started turning blue. So I had to call 911, and thankfully everything was okay. He was okay. He had a virus and had a seizure. But you know, to me, he was dying just right there. And about 2 weeks after that, I was just done. Like, I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't get to work. I had those episodes of low blood sugar leading up to it and a couple of things, but that event was like the culminating event that just after it, I was wrecked. And everybody knows that point where they're just completely wrecked. You are not functioning.
Yeah, the light goes off. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do things like take a shower. I used to love taking 45-minute shower. I know it's bad for the environment, it wastes a lot of water. I know, but it was great. At that point, there were days I just couldn't shower because the heat and just standing up was not an option. Couldn't walk to work, couldn't walk more than 200 steps, and that was probably my lowest point. There's like a straw that breaks the camel's back, but there are a bunch of preceding events leading up to it. And as I say, hindsight's 2020, you know.
Yeah, you had mentioned in 2014 in our previous chat that you had something similar. Well, what happened there?
Similar in 2014, it was winter and work and stuff was a little stressful. It wasn't anything too much though, but to me, everything felt too much. And then I kind of like one day had to crawl. I was at the grocery store and all of a sudden I just had to drive home and literally crawled into bed. Lasted about 2 weeks. I took a couple weeks off of work. Summer came and then I was like, fine. And so I was like, okay, that was weird. That was a blip. Maybe it was a virus. Maybe it was stress. This is my cat joining in,
What's your cat's name?
Mr. Milty.
Mr. Milty. Hi.
um, and so I kind of started implementing some health things just to be like, okay, well, start to take care of yourself a little bit more. I was looking for like tips and tricks back then. So yeah, it had happened once before. Just not at the duration that it happened in 2018. It wasn't really until I would say spring of 2020 when we got into lockdown that things really, really turned the corner
For good.
for good, for good.
Okay, so Katie, how did you deal with this with friends and family and communicating about this?
Well, so I took a very good approach with communicating by not communicating. That was my strategy. And I think this goes with like a lot of people. First of all, me, a type of personality I have, you don't want to show weakness. So admitting you have a chronic illness, forget it. Forget it. Off limits. And obviously, my immediate family members and one of my sisters I lived with, we live next door, very close with. Obviously, she knew everything, was totally involved with it. But from everybody else, other family members, friends, I took the approach of, okay, maybe tomorrow I'll be better or next week I'll be better. And I don't have to tell anyone. I don't have to tell anyone. Days rolled into weeks, weeks rolled into months, months rolled into years. And it's not a good strategy because people are like, well, where'd you go? You fell off the face of the earth. I think you're kind of just being a jerk. Or, you don't see someone and then you tell them like you've been on death's doorstep for a couple years and they're like, well, you look fine. It's just like a lose-lose situation. And so I, I didn't handle it well. The thing is, then you take this on yourself, which just makes it that much worse by shutting people out and not being vulnerable. So
Yeah. Were you able to socialize or was that limited?
it was limited. I was very selective. I'm fairly introverted to begin with. I'm kind of like one of those introverts, but like I have a very extroverted job. So I can function in both, but I'm totally content entertaining myself, listening to music, reading a book, totally good like that. So that wasn't that big of adjustment, but I was selective. I was able to socialize, but it would be in very small fragments. I wasn't going on trips with people. It was very like, you've got 2 hours of my time. And I'd let people in a little bit enough. At some points, I couldn't hide it. I'd look terrible, like no color, not being able to stand up, mentally just not sharp. Like, can't throw back the wit and the sarcasm and all that. That goes when you're feeling bad. So it was tough. And then people, you don't want to, but my fear was that people would start treating me different. I don't want pity. I don't want to be pitied. I don't want to be coddled. I didn't want any of that. So I was very strategic in my interactions and very limited. And I didn't do a lot, which is not a healthy approach.
Yeah. I had a really boring 3 years.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you did, like, set limits, so you did have some boundaries, like, you said, "Okay, you have 2 hours," or yeah,
I
did
mean,
you?
I didn't tell the people,
Okay,
right? They have 2 hours. It was more of like I would like that's how I would kind of just navigate the situation.
okay, you'd peace out after 2
I'd
hours.
peace out, yeah, which is not an uncommon wouldn't be an uncommon thing for me to do.
Well, some people don't know how to say I had to work on saying bye to people and, like, just leaving. I that was a big struggle for me.
You're
But
not
yeah,
good with the peace out.
no.
You don't do the, "I'm gonna go to the bathroom and walk out."
But
I
now
don't do that
I
either. That's just rude.
yeah, but I did get better, and I think it definitely helped my healing. Okay, so you were struggling to walk 300 steps in the beginning, and then was that when your upward trajectory came, spring 2020?
It was 2018 was like rock bottom, and that was when I would do like tricks. Like that's when I had figured out loading up on salt, loading up on B vitamins. The other thing that is really helpful to me is essential amino acids. So I would just take these things in like massive quantities to kind of get me over this hurdle. And I put myself on like an autoimmune paleo style diet coupled with salt, B vitamins, amino acids. And that was what kind of got me out of the hole. I was able to slowly start to get back to work. And a couple months into it, I was like, okay, maybe this was a blip. And then I do things like I went skiing. I took my niece skiing and it was nothing crazy. It was, just going down the hill. But afterwards, the day after, I was, back in a hole. And it was at that point where I talked to my doctors again and I was like, adrenaline's a problem. I check all my stats. I check my glucose. I check all this. You've checked it. Everything's checked. But it's like stuff's not getting into the cells, stuff's not working. And they're kind of like, ah. So those two things led me to mitochondria and autonomic nervous system. So I just made a hypothesis and dug into tackling those two issues. And so that was able to bring me a lot forward fairly, not quick, not overnight. We're talking months and months and months, but is quick when you hear a lot of people struggling years and years and decades. So,
Yeah, I had such a similar journey. I immediately went paleo, AIP, you name it, did the B vitamins. I was
yep.
taking like 12,000% B vitamins. I did some of the aminos, the magnesium, all the stuff.
Yep.
I had like a war chest of supplements. I would carry around my supplement baggie everywhere.
I should take you into my room with a cabinet.
Yeah, and that gave me a boost, and that got me out of a hole as well. But I love how you said you just felt your body was producing energy, but it wasn't getting into the cell, and that you felt this on a cellular level.
Yeah. And I didn't know as much as I knew back then, but it made sense. Intuitively, your body talks to you, even though you don't understand it on a scientific level at that point.
I think I felt something very similar, and I don't think we're alone in that.
Oh, absolutely not. No, no. And I think that's, part of it. Everybody's out there trying to tell their story and trying to get the medical community and medical professionals to listen. And a lot of the time, medicine doesn't like to hear anecdote or hypothesis. Things have to be tested and validated, and there has to be like a big group. But with this, you've got to start somewhere.
I really believe the medical community, people who lead long COVID clinics,
Yep.
could benefit from listening to people who recovered from ME/CFS, post-viral fatigue, whatever you want to call it.
Right. Whatever you want to call it.
Could really benefit from how we were able to get out. Yeah. So you saw the best doctors. You're in Boston. So literally the best hospitals in the world are where you're at.
At my fingertips. Yep.
But they didn't really have an answer for you. So when did you realize that, they're not going to have the answer, or did they?
It was fairly early on. It was probably about 6 months in when I was in my biggest hole after I demanded testing and all this stuff because it comes back normal. So they don't want or can't, or for insurance or whatever it is, don't go out on a limb because there's just nothing leading them. The traditional tests don't show anything. So it's probably about 3 to 6 months in that I was like, this isn't going to work. And it's not to knock the medical community or doctors anything. A lot of it is multifactorial. They don't have the resources. They don't have the understanding. They're not taught about this, a lot of this, like even nutrition and supplements and that stuff at school. So it's a little bit outside of the normal practice. But so it was fairly early on that I was like, you're going to have to tackle this on yourself. You're going to have to figure it out. And I refuse to believe that you can't get better, that this is how the rest of your life's going to be. I was like, I refuse to accept that. I'm not saying that anybody who is still sick or can't recover is accepting it. That's not what I'm saying. But that was the motivation that kept me moving forward to do the reading, dig in, test, spend the money. The money is a big thing. It's an expensive thing to work yourself out of. I mean, tens and tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket just trying to figure out, what worked, what didn't. At one point, I was eating 2 grass-fed ribeyes a day, like 2 2-pound grass-fed ribeyes. That alone is $50 a
I'm
day.
glad you mentioned this because it's one of the most expensive conditions. And, I wanted to eat more plants for the animals, but for some reason, I think a metabolic switch happened of some sort. And I don't know if you felt this, but it's like my body could only get energy from big pieces of meat. It was like I wanted to eat quinoa, but I wouldn't be able to walk 2 blocks the next day.
Exactly. There's something about it. I couldn't and still don't deviate. I can eat, variety a little bit, but still I do much better if I'm eating a lot of meat. And I keep it clean, try and keep it as grass-fed and organic as possible. It's not possible all the time because it is very expensive. And for me, for a while, it was red meat. I can do more chicken and those type of meats, but at the beginning, it was strictly I just needed like an insane amount of red meat per day.
Yeah, I think there's L-carnitine in.
L-carnitine, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are differences because I know people who did paleo and then they found vegan to work better. So I think everyone doesn't have the exact
No, they
same
don't.
metabolic profile
No.
shifts. And just as a side note, my diet changed after recovery. Probably about a year after I started eating less meat and more beans and nuts again. And I also have grains somewhat often. And I enjoy more fruit in the summer and I'm enjoying my smoothies. Before, I didn't have any cold food and ate mostly meat and low glycemic vegetables. But yeah, Katie's actually eating less carbs now than during her CFS journey. And she'll explain that later. So yeah, we're all different.
Some people do great going vegan, going plant-based. My whole thing is you have to test and find what works for you. Because what worked for me
Yes.
might not work for the person next to me, and everybody's different. You've got to listen to your body. And
Yeah.
vegan might work for some, and like not even paleo, but flat out carnivore diet might work for
Yeah, I
others.
know some people who loaded up on fruit, some people who were carnivore, but probably the biggest majority did eat paleo from the recovery stories. But I've seen it all. So we encourage you to listen to your body because it knows best.
I'm sorry. He's been active tonight.
This makes the video more fun.
Uh,
Awesome. So yeah, so we talked about blood sugar stabilization.
yes, this is how we connected. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and it's totally underrated, but yeah, and the diet that you went with kept your blood sugar level stable so you didn't get dizzy. And then the salt you said helped too.
Yeah, the first thing I really had to tackle was the blood sugar dysregulation. It was up and down, it was all over the place. It felt like it was from 1 minute to the next, everything was unpredictable. And so to get out of that, I was eating small amounts in very frequent intervals. And some people read that metabolically, that's not the best thing to do. But where the state that someone's CFS is in, you have to make sure that blood sugar is level because every time it crashes, the problem is it's a stress response. So whether it's physiological or psychological, you've got to make sure those stress responses are not being triggered. So blood sugar is a very stressful response on the body. It's similar to getting very angry or very scared. And so that was a first step. And that took a bit. Like you can't get your blood sugar under control overnight, but it took months.
Were you
But
testing your blood sugar with a test strip or were you
yeah, because back even 2 years ago, you couldn't. I mean, you could with a get the continuous glucose monitor. Now you can order a bunch online. I actually just ordered one.
which one did you get?
It's actually right.
Which
NutriSense.
Oh yeah, I just got
Yeah.
that one too.
Oh no way. We'll have to
Yeah.
try them at the same time. Trade tips.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Cool. So you said the other thing was the autonomic nervous system that you sensed and feeling like your body had some type of issue or response to adrenaline.
Yes. Actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So back in 2014, what I actually ended up doing is I ended up taking a class at the Herbert Benson out of MGH in Boston. And what it does is it addresses you triggering the relaxation response. It's the opposite of your fight or flight. They teach you how to
Rest and digest.
the rest and digest. Thank you. So back in 2014, I took a class on this. So I was like, okay, you've got to kind of go back to these practices. And so there is when I started doing meditation, and I'm not very good at meditation. So I do the guided meditations. And for me, that helped a lot because for me, I was sitting there quiet and I couldn't get the head trash turned off. And no matter how much I tried, so guided meditations were huge for me.
Do you have a favorite app that you use?
So I read this book and it's actually right behind me. It's called The Last Best Cure. And she tells a similar story. It's not CFS, but she had a couple other things. And in it, she referenced Tara Brock. She has a website.
I've heard of her.
Yeah, she releases them on a podcast and she does them almost daily and they're fantastic. So that was a big resource for me. And it's free. That's a handy one. So I was doing the meditation and then I stumbled upon the ANS retraining, the limbic system retraining.
So you checked out a few ones. You checked out DNRS, but that didn't resonate with you?
It didn't. I tried it. That was the first one I tried and it just didn't mesh with my personality. I know you and a lot of other people have had a lot of
I dug into that.
yeah, tons of people. It's worked for them. And I know it's a big thing for you.
Yeah, but you found ANS Rewire.
Yeah, which is Dan Knifers. He's out of Australia. And so that kind of resonated with me a bit more because he does a lot of guided meditation, binaural beats, a progressive muscle relaxation. I find that to be helpful. Basically, like you're lying down and it's like a guided meditation that walks you through tensing and releasing all different body parts and muscles. And so I found that one to be
I
fairly
think that might be
effective.
new because I remember he had two and you were just sitting down. And I remember he said the word like buttocks, and that always made me. But I loved his meditation. He had a really good one. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I would
And
listen to it twice a day.
oh, yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. My protocol was doing a guided meditation in the morning and the evening. And then in the middle of the day, I was sneaking in, and I was able to do this because at this point we were in the COVID lockdown. And in the middle of the day, I started experimenting with sound therapy. I started with Huso, and the other one was Newcom. At the time, about a year ago, Newcom was like $5,000, $6,000, totally out of reach. Recently, they released a monthly subscription that you can use with your iPhone, and it's only about $40. So it's this sound frequency. And so I was doing the guided meditation sound frequency and then ending the day with guided meditation. And through that, in a period of a couple weeks, I was able to feel significantly better. And what Dan Neiffer's program, and I don't know if they tackle this in DNRS, but he would address what he called anchors. And basically, it was these associations if you were having a crash or a bad day that you were subconsciously attaching these anchors to it, which totally resonated with me because I would get to the point where I wouldn't go to the grocery store because so many times standing in line waiting to check out, just start to sweat, be like, oh my God, am I going to pass out in front of all these people? And so that, because of the orthostatic intolerance, that just gets embedded in your head. Similarly, I would go places that I would drive to and associate them with feeling terrible. I would avoid driving them. So he talks about how you get rid of those kind of anchors and triggers, which I found to be very, very helpful.
In the beginning, they might have been useful for protecting you, but now they're blocking your healing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, you also shared with me that getting into a good circadian rhythm and sleep stuff was helpful for you.
Yep. So first of all, it's hard to sleep with this. Everybody knows like sometimes people shoot awake in the middle of the night, can't fall asleep. So you really eliminate external variables. I got rid of any fluorescent lights, put just incandescent bulbs in. If you're doing stuff on the computer, put the blue light blockers on. And also, one of my things that I like to do, which is kind of like my go to, I'll take a few supplements before going to bed. I find magnesium's pretty good, but what I found the most effective was glycine, which I found that it helped regulate my blood sugar during the night. I wasn't like, jolting awake at like 2 to 4 a.m., which sometimes you would just jolt awake and just be wired and not be able to fall back to sleep. So glycine helped with that. And to kind of really wind down, what I would do, it's kind of like a hack, but I'd get this thing called an acupressure mat. You can get it on Amazon for like 20 bucks, but it's this like prickly mat. I'd lay on it with my headphones, listen to an audiobook, and do binaural beats and do that for like a half an hour. And it just kind of lulls you. And if you're holding on to anything, it'll just melt it away. I need all these little tricks and gadgets because I'm not there yet where I can just turn my mind off. Like I need a little story, some binaural beats, and an acupressure mat to kind of like soothe everything away.
You need to make a video of this. Okay. I need to see the mat. And
Oh, I should have brought it out. I could have held it up.
okay. So, what else? Oh, yeah. So, did you do any detox protocols or did you reduce environmental stress in any way?
Yeah, so I was fairly clean before I filter my water. I was originally using the Berkey, but that strips everything out. And so when I was really bad, I couldn't drink dead water. So I found clearly filtered. So what it does is it filters everything out except for the minerals. It keeps the minerals in. So I found this water system and it's affordable. It's a countertop. Like if you live in an apartment and can't install something, this was a great option. So clean the water, clean the air. Austin Air and Coe, my two go-to brands. Cleaning products. Don't use anything scented unless It comes from like a natural oil or spice scent. Uh, so my food mainly organic. And what else? I'm missing one thing. I have my notes just. So I did all that. And what I actually ended up investing in was a sauna. So I have an infrared sauna. Before I got to the point where I could actually use the sauna to sweat and detox took a long time to get to. It's probably took close to, I want to say probably close to a year before I got comfortable and strong enough to actually get in a heat source. So I do that and I find that to be helpful. It did take a while to build up to it.
Did you start with 1 minute or like,
At that point, I was able to start with like 5 or 10. And then I was able to work myself up to like a half an hour. I usually, still to this day, I usually don't push it much above a half an hour. I find it to be a little too much at that point. But I did find the sauna to be beneficial because what I believe is an underlying root of all this is mold, which you can relate to. Hundreds, if not thousands, tens of thousands of other people are like, yes, mold.
so tell us about your mold story.
So when everything kind of crumbled in 2018, and that year I had made all these adjustments, learned everything, supplements, sleep, done all this stuff. I had moved apartments like 3 times in that year, and I was still just like plateauing. Then we had the lockdown. And what happened, Mr. Milty's back. And what happened about 45 days into the lockdown, I felt terrible. So I was working from home, but I felt terrible. And then all of a sudden, I felt amazing. I was able to start working out again. It was like overnight. And it was at that point I realized the office was probably filled with mold. It was kind of not an older building, but 1950s, 1970s office building being constantly renovated, bathrooms leaking all the time. And I realized that most people's source of mold is in their home, but what I believe that triggered it and kept me from getting better was the mold in the office because we moved into a new office in late 2017. And then early 2018 was when all these things started creeping up.
Yes, that's exactly like my story. I moved into a place and then 3 months later, I got a flu-like virus, and the mold was probably preventing my body to recover, just like you were prevented to recover from that sinus infection.
Yeah, and I should have known that the sinus was probably coming in from the stuff, and it was my body's way of it was just in there from the building. But mold, it sounds so innocuous, but it really is just it's not something to be taken lightly.
Yeah, and I'm trying to have a balance with it too because I took a really extreme avoidance approach, and then any little exposure would just set me back to zero. So then I had to try to be more incremental about it and do, you know, the brain calming stuff to function in society.
Yeah, and you bring up such a good point. There's such a delicate balance of taking it very seriously, yet not letting it consume you. And it's hard to like distinguish the two. And like you, I got to the point where I was like, I can't go there. I can't even risk it. And you have to kind of find a way. You have to find a way to exist with it, but not be complacent. Like if your dwelling area has mold, you have to address it. You can't pretend it's going to go away. But if you happen to go to a moldy restaurant, you can probably dine in it for a half an hour and be okay. Like that type of thing. And for some people, dining in a restaurant for a half an hour would be too much. But what I'm saying is, if you're in the spot where you could be in somewhere for 30 minutes, don't freak out about it. You're going to be okay. Like, know your threshold is kind of how I see it.
That is perfectly stated. Oh my gosh, you hit the nail on the head, exactly how I feel. And you said it in such an insightful way. Yeah. Know your threshold and not freaking out about it, because when we're freaking out about it, it's adding to the stress response that prevents us from recovering from exertion in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it's a cycle. And it's so hard when you have something that triggers you into that. Oh my God. It's easy to say, don't let it happen, but actually putting it into practice isn't a whole other thing. But it's what you have to do. You have to make sure that this cycle does not get repeated and you don't keep looping your brain and having it just bing, bing, bing.
Exactly. I just wanted to share some reflections about this because this was part of my story too. And this is not medical advice. Mold is a part of the environment, but it's not ideal in large amounts. And at first I ignored it, then I got test results with proof and went into extreme avoidance mode. But that came with big setbacks. In the end, the best way for me was reducing it and then healing my nervous system to live in harmony. So, when would you say you fully recovered?
I would say it'd probably be over the past summer of 2020, where I was really able to exercise. For a while, by balancing the blood sugar, I couldn't go low carb. And I realized that because in order to go low carb, your mitochondria has to be working very well and your adrenals have to be functioning. Your autonomic nervous system has to be stable. And so during last summer, I was able to start dropping my carbs and I was able to start oxidizing fat for fuel and I was able to start exercising. So those were the two main points where I was like, okay, things are back. My body's working. Like we're in a good spot.
Wait, I have a question. So, you were eating carbs before this? I thought you were AIP.
I had to throw in some carbs. So I would do sweet potatoes. I wasn't eating wheat. I would eat apples. I wouldn't be able to have like a 20 carb a day because it was just
Then
too.
you decreased carbs even more?
Yes. I was probably doing 70, 75 carbs. When I say paleo autoimmune, it's styled, but I would have to do some carbs because if I dropped it below a certain threshold, my body just wasn't able to oxidize the fat. And so over the course of a couple of years, I was weaning down the carb load, weaning down the carb load. And so where I got to the point where I could basically go, 20 carbs and run, which I couldn't before.
And that helped support your blood sugar levels?
It helps support the blood sugar, more of the fat oxidation. So like where your body's using fat for fuel. And I realized that was another thing I brought up to the doctors. I was like, I can't, my body is not utilizing fat for fuel anymore. I was like, I can only do glucose and the glucose isn't working great, but I can't even get it. So it's in fat oxidation. And through my research, I found that you need healthy mitochondria to use fat for fuel. So to build a mitochondria to the point where I could go back into a fat adapted state, it took a lot of time. And it took about from low point 2018 to high point of summer 2020. So that's
Very gradual. That seems like a catch-22 situation.
it is. It is.
Carbs made your blood sugar unstable, but you could only get energy from them?
Because there's this window, and when your body switches over to using fat, it also is very stressful on the adrenals and your autonomic. So it triggers like a stress response. So I had to get the point where my body could withstand a stress response. Also, the mitochondria being healthy enough to utilize the fat. And it had to be tailored. The carbs couldn't exceed the threshold where it would dysregulate the blood sugar. So it's a very, very delicate and insane balance. And it's so tough. You want to give up at points, but you have to trust that eventually it's going to get there.
So you were doing the blood strips and now you have the CGM.
I use the Keto Mojo to test blood and ketones. And I could tell that it was crazy. I'd attempt to drop my carbs and the ketones were not, which are what represents if you're utilizing fat for fuel, they weren't climbing. They weren't. And it was like, it was not a good spot.
Yeah, yeah.
Through my protocol, over time, I was able to get there, exercising and fat for fuel. And those were my two main markers.
Yeah. Wow. Really useful information. Okay.
You're like, oh my God, cancel the interview.
No, this is so good. I'm like, I need all these things. I feel we're like selling some products here. We should be getting sponsors. Kidding. Okay.
I know. I like to say the things that I'm using because yeah, I'm not endorsing or getting like kickbacks for anything, but just when you're sick, it's hard to even read books. It's hard to read articles. It's hard to do the research to find the right product. So I like to throw out what I've been using, not as an endorsement per se, but just to help lower the learning curve, help shortening the learning curve so people can spend less time trying to like sort everything out and kind of just implement what they think works and what they think doesn't.
Yeah, just pick and choose what resonates with them because the internet, it's the wild west out there.
Yep.
Yeah, especially if you have brain fog. And was brain fog something you dealt with?
Oh, definitely. that year our company had a bad year, so it was relatively slow. I would literally come home and say, if we were busy, I don't know how I do my job right now. And thankfully my employer was very supportive.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So were you working full time by 2020?
I never stopped working. I was never even out longer than 3 days because just mentally I was like, you can't be sick, they'll eat you alive. So I never had to go off leave, but I did get accommodations. They kind of let me come in, and I didn't let everyone know, but there were a few people that knew. So I'd come in late, kind of shorten my hours, adjust things that way.
And then when you were home, you were like wiped out.
Yeah, there would be days where I'd call out sick intermittently and I'd take extended weekends and things like that. So I did, my schedule is not anywhere near normal, but I didn't have to go on disability leave or anything like
Yeah.
that. I make it sound easy, but when I got off the train, I'd have to find the escalators because I couldn't walk up the stairs to get out of the subway. I'd have to calculate whether I could make it into the office. If I had to go to the bathroom, I'd have to calculate whether I could make it, have the steps, make it to the bathroom. And okay, you've got to make sure you can get back and not pass out. So it was awful. I should have taken time off. I guess that's a point. People should not push through. It's not, admit your vulnerability and see what happens. It all works out.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Okay. So how is life like on the other side now?
It's great. It's great. Like I said, I'm able to work out, keep a good diet. I recently started a new job. I was able to go through the interview process, which it was like 10 rounds. So it was a very rigorous interview process. I was able to make it through that. I was able to start the new job. So things are great. I am very, very grateful for where I'm at now. And I certainly don't take things for granted. And I think we all can relate to that. And it's the little things like even today when I see people walking down the street with coffee cups, and I'm like, it does trigger you. I'm like, they are able to just walk in the coffee shop, grab their coffee, and go on a walk. Whereas still to me, that's like, oh, wow, I would still have to think about whether I could have the coffee. Caveat, I do mainly decaf.
Mhm.
Occasionally I'll have some caffeine, but like things are great now, but you don't ever fully go back. It's always in the back of your head, even though things are, but I'm extremely grateful and, you know, so grateful that I was able to have this opportunity to share my story, even though I feel like I'm just rambling. But I hope that
It's so
some of
good.
it's been coherent and maybe helpful. And I don't know, it's just been great.
Yeah. Do you have any final message to people watching this?
My message is stay hopeful. Anybody who tells you you can't or you won't or this won't get better or anything like that, don't listen to it. Listen to yourself. Put one foot in front of the other, metaphorically, even if you can't put one foot in front of the other, like keep hope, keep going because, you know, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Wow. Powerfully stated. And how can people reach you, Katie?
Okay. How can they reach? So I have a little blog. It's very little, but it's called chronicfatigueprotocol.com. And you can hit me up there. There's contact form that'll send you to my email. Also, if you toss in your email, you'll get a guide kind of outlining some of the stuff we talked about. If anybody's interested in the exact steps I took, if I was not as articulate as I should have been. So you can kind of find the tips and tricks there and the whole protocol I used.
Yeah, it is such a good guide. There's 5 categories and you include the checklists and it's so handy. So I encourage people to check that out and download your free guide. And that's so
Cool.
wonderful that you made that, Katie. And I'm so grateful we got to chat today about this.
I'm so excited. Like we connected and it was all through a tweet and it was great. And look at this. It's so great that you're, getting everybody together and sharing these stories. It's what's needed and it's
Yeah,
it's it's great
that's my
work.
motto. It's like we're out of this together. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're just on a similar wavelength.
It's kind of uncanny the similarities.
Yeah, because I never went into details about certain things. I'm like, oh yeah.
You want to share, but you probably don't want to throw everything out there. Like for me, I don't want to go into the details on the internet of how exactly my personal life was terrible and all that stuff. Like, I don't know. We don't need to go into that much detail.
Well, we went in a lot. I learned a lot about the ketones. So yeah.
Oh, I went
Mhm.
off there. You can clip that. You're like, wait a minute, you said you were paleo, but then you have to eat the carbs. And I was like, I know, actually, I should have clarified that.
No, but it's all about the nuance. It's like recovery, it's about that nuance. And it's not like black and white. It's you can't just go from one diet to another in a
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry that Mr. Milty kind of
day.
made his way in.
Bye, Mr. Milty.
Liz, thank you so much. This was great. Thank you.
Take care,
All
Katie.
right.
You can find Katie at her website, chronicfatigueprotocol.com, and I encourage you to get her free guide. It's awesome. Your like would be much appreciated, and you can visit my site, healwithliz.com, for Katie's detailed written recovery stories. Sending you healing vibes.